What is up, and welcome back to 24 Minutes of A24, the podcast that takes a look at the A24 library 24 minutes at a time. I'm Ethan Simi, and just Ethan Simi. There is no Ben Lawhorn on this week's episode of the pod. Ben is traveling, he's seeing the world, he's taking a very luxurious cruise through Japan, which may or may not be better than this podcast. Yet to be seen. We'll see when he gets back, see how that works out. But in his place, I've brought on a returning guest, best friend of the podcast, Alden Diaz, to talk about a movie that is really kind of the first revisiting that we are doing of a film. Alden, welcome to the pod. How you doing, man?
I'm really good. I'm just wondering now, do I get to go on the Japanese cruise after and really see which one's better? Do you guys always bring your friends on vacation too? Yeah, that'd be great. No, really happy to be here. I was excited when you hit me up to talk about this one again, mostly because I know you don't often revisit things, if ever. And so it's been, I think your notes say a year, so I'm going to trust you since we talked about it, which is crazy. That it's been that long, and so it's interesting to look back on it.
Absolutely. So this is a listener requested episode. So one of our Twitter followers at KFids, shout out, came in third place in our Oscar predictions contest, pretty much, that we had, and third place got you an episode request. And so he requested that we cover A Most Violent Year. I'm going to read the logline to the movie very quickly. In New York City, 1981, an ambitious immigrant fights to protect his business and family during the most dangerous year in the city's history. As is the case with most of our podcasts, spoilers are ahead for A Most Violent Year. Came out in 2014, so I feel like, we're right on that 10-year cusp almost, so I feel like we're okay, just dive in spoilers first. If you've
absolutely.
You haven't seen the movie, it's streaming on HBO Max right now. You can go check it out. That's how I watched it. So you're right, Alden. It has been nearly a year, episode 36 to be exact.
Wow.
And I think we're on like 88 now, 89. Wow. This might even be. So May of 2022. You were also on for that podcast, and so I figured, you know what? We're revisiting. It is technically only the second movie we've ever revisited. We've done 2 episodes on Everything Everywhere All at Once, initially when it came out, and then when it was in the Best Picture conversation for the Oscars.
Right.
This is the first official revisiting of a film, and I wanted to have you back because I know you love this movie, and I'm excited to talk about it. I don't know if you can remember. I didn't go back and listen. Do you remember how you rated this movie last time? Were you singing some praises, or were you down a little bit about it?
I was definitely singing praises. Now, how I literally rated it, I'm not sure, because I know the rating system changed.
Right, we did.
And it used to be not looser, but they used to be less defined as ranking titles. So you're going to have to refresh me. I probably gave it whichever one is the top one.
Sure.
Probably.
Yeah, I think it was Good Time. I can barely remember our old ranking system. Yeah. I believe it was like First Cow, I think, was the best that you could go. We had a Good Time, and then we had a Farewell, which was kind of not really enjoying the film. So Ben rated this one a Farewell. I gave it a Good Time. We now have a new rating structure, as you mentioned, A through F24. So I'm curious at the end of this conversation where we're gonna kind of land on this. Now this movie from 2014 stars Oscar Isaac, Jessica Chastain. I'm curious to start this conversation off. Do you think that this movie is underrated within the A24 library? Because I just frankly don't see people ever talking about this movie ever.
No one does. I think I told this story a little bit, so it's a little bit repetitive for longtime listeners, but I found this as my local movie stop was going out of business.
Yes.
And I bought it strictly because I think at that point we already knew Oscar Isaac was going to be in Star Wars. So I was trying to consume more Oscar Isaac stuff. And I was like, who is this guy? And I already knew Jessica Chastain from Zero to Dark 30. And I thought, wow, look at this. This is going to be like a great crime movie that we all talk about. These two are on the rise. No one talks about it. I do think it's underrated. I wonder if within the catalog of A24, if part of that is because there's a certain shine, a certain explosiveness, a certain punch that they tend to have, whether that's in science fiction, whether that's in horror, and or in crime. Like, this is not uncut gems, intense in your face, make your blood boil. This is definitely about the implications. Like, the brilliance of the title, A Most Violent Year, is that it's really not that at all. It's hanging over the characters. And I wonder if this was released as a streaming film, maybe now, if it would have a different reception.
Yeah, I think that brings up a really good point, because I think we mentioned, and I'm just kind of looking through here at the list of A24 films. So this was released on December 31st of 2014, which is a little interesting for sure. I think it's in like the first 15 or 20 movies that A24 produced. I mean, they started back in February of 2013. And soon after this is when Ex Machina, or I guess soon before, is when Ex Machina kind of got its start just a few movies later in the catalog. So that, to me, is kind of like the very first entry into like, oh, A24, sci-fi, kind of weird. Things get a little dicey, and you kind of have these big moments. So I think in terms of that, it definitely is underrated, if not strictly for the fact that it came really early. Like, people just didn't know what they were getting their hands on. I think last time we talked about this, one of the questions I posed, and if not, I'm posing it now, I'm curious if this movie might fare better as an 8-part miniseries, as a 10-part miniseries, right? I think it could be a very fascinating case study because of the slow burn and the high drama and the ultimate kind of deep character studies that we start to embrace, but we don't get that time. So we don't really get to that deep level that a show might give us.
Yeah, if this was airing, after Succession or something, like, you got to wonder how it would be. And these two performers reunited on TV, and so it's like that you would have no issue there. It could be the same, and give it the depth and sort of the breadth to stretch. It's interesting to think about what in the story too would change with that amount of time. I would have to do a little research to find some interviews or talk to the man myself, or JC Chandor, but like, is the fact that the violence is mostly implied because of the constraints of a movie? If this had the 8 episodes and it was 45 minutes to an hour a piece, would we see some really crazy water cooler online Twitter moments that everybody loves?
Yeah, and especially if you get someone like HBO to finance something like this, you could really start to see something a little bit more boundary pushing. And you bring up how the violence is kind of all around our main character of Abel, or Oscar Isaac. And there's a very particular moment. We will talk about it in the True Cinema slate of things. He basically says, I never wanted to be a gangster, and now I basically am. And I think that storyline would be fascinating with where this movie ends, to then see his rise into violence, because really we just get a brief introduction into this forced violence that he might have to partake in. Blood is on his hands in one fashion or another, and he is resisting the violence around him. So I would love like an 8-part miniseries if we could like redo this. That being said, I still think this movie's quite good. We will get into it. We'll kind of do some high level, but before that, we had a specific request from K-Fids about this movie, talking about the score and the composer, Alex Ebert. Now, he is the lead singer and songwriter for 2 bands, actually, for Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros and Ema Robot. The score for this movie, influenced by the culture and life of the 1980s, specifically Miami Vice and Scarface. And then there's one quote from him I wanted to pull real fast. It says, it's a synthesis of sort of calling card themes and extended atmospheres. There's horns and flutes and strings, but there's also sort of these meditative synthetic beds underlying. When I revisited this movie, and I'm really grateful that K-Fids called this out to talk about the score and look at it, I think it's like just scrumptious. I think it is a delicious score for this, and it is ultimately very tone setting. How do you feel about the score for this movie?
Tone setting's right. And when again, like you, I was like, okay, when I think about it, it's been years, but it's not something I thought about. So let's try to push other aspects, to the background and really try to listen to the film. And it's so atmospheric. And I think it does a really good job of getting in touch with characters and conveying a lot of what we're not seeing, conveying a lot of the internal struggle. And it almost, as the corruption sort of sets in, you can feel the score really start to come alive. Like it's a very that 80s stuff that he talks about where the crime was really bubbling in Miami Vice or in Scarface. Like when we get there, we really get there, and by the end, it does feel like significantly more explosive than it was at the beginning.
100%. And there's a very key kind of score that happens during a very kind of electric scene at the end that is absolutely roaring. There's one thing with the score I did want to bring up before we start diving really kind of deeper into this movie. There's a scene in the very beginning when Abel is kind of overlooking the city skyline. That's the first introduction we get really to him as a character and him trying to ultimately chase this thing, this idea, this American dream that he doesn't have. And that stems to owning the property that is across the river from him so he can import his oil directly. He has more tankers to store his oil. Right. All of these very technical things that are beneficial. And the score in that moment when he's overlooking that city skyline and that piece of property is so hopeful, and it is so mesmerizing. And like you said, it kind of creates this own little meditative space. And I just think that's something that goes really overlooked in a movie like this. And again, like it does really set the pace and the tone of this movie. What did you think overall of the film before we dive into true cinema? What's your general take on the movie?
My general take is that as I've revisited it now a couple times, and it's been a year since the last time, I really appreciate the sort of confidence that this team, JC Chandor and A24 and this team had in the actors to sort of play it like theater a lot of the time. Like they really are, I think, the best part of it, whether it's Isaac or Chastain or Albert Brooks, and like just the way that they all fit together really stuck out to me. And then once I started focusing on the score as well, they are in sync really, really well. It's a very this sounds like not a compliment, like when you're not sure how to, but it really, I do mean it. It's so solid and like just well crafted. Like I don't think this is a movie where you can say, like some of its peers in this genre, like, oh, it's that scene, or oh, that's that's the tracking shot that everybody loves, or that's the dolly zoom that everybody loves, or this is the kill that everybody loves. It's not that. It's all simmering. And so you sort of have to lock in with the characters, and there's a point that we're going to talk about later about an almost star of the movie that makes me thinking about that makes me sort of more solid in this point that I'm glad it was Oscar, because I think that he's really, really good at behind the eyes acting, and I think with him that's sort of a microcosm for the whole movie, is that it's not going to have some Shakespearean speech or some loud Joe Pesci character. It's just somebody trying really hard to affect the world around them, but not break while they do it.
I think in conjunction with everything that we've been talking about so far, the splashy life that A24 has created with their new projects and the, kind of simmering tone of this movie, I think that in particular is kind of why this movie does fly under the radar a lot, because it clocks in a little over 2 hours, and there's no, peak moment leading into the third act of madness, right? There's no, you don't build to anything in particular. Yes, there is a violent act to kind of finish out the film that is exceptionally telling of our character Abel and his family. But outside of that, it is a simmering film. It is an exceptionally slow burn that doesn't have a grandiose monologue, even though that might be kind of fun. I don't know. But I love this world that they've created, and it is so focused. Like, it's so hyper-focused on this one man and his oil business, essentially, his gas business. And I just think that's a really interesting take on this movie, and I really appreciate it for that. For me, and I read a review that helped influence this thought, or kind of evolutionize this thought a little bit. It is an exceptionally solid 3.5-star thriller. Like, it is very good at what it comes to do. It doesn't have anything flashy that might take it to the next level. The script is, while it is strong, there are a couple of weak points that you could point to and say a pass here or there would have been a little bit more beneficial, some more time in this scene or what have you. But it does what it sets out to do very efficiently, very well, and very strongly. And we talked about a newer A24 movie, Sharper, last week on the pod, that is also a thriller, and it is a complete 180 from this movie. It is quick, it is neck-bending twists, it is a very in-your-face score, it is everything the opposite of this. I like this movie a lot more because of these simmering aspects of it. I want to ask you a very particular question, now that we're kind of talking about the movie itself. Focuses on a property deal, essentially, right? Abel is trying to acquire this property across from him, and it takes the entire movie to kind of get there. How do you have an idea? How much did this property cost? Because I think I've done the math right, but I'm genuinely curious. I might have messed something up. I want to know what did Abel have at stake here? You know, how much money are we playing with?
I'm not sure. Now, I pulled up here. Now, you're right. So you asked me. So I had here notes. 1.5 million is the fuel oil terminal on the East River. So I believe that's it. That's the only number that stuck out to me. Okay. But and later on, with the stolen oil stuff, he's still 600,000 short. Right.
So I'm curious because the movie starts with one briefcase full of cash, and that's his deposit. He mentions that it's a 40% deposit on the land. Now, with everything he had to get afterwards, it seemed like $1.5 million he still needed to grab, is kind of what we see. And he starts taking these like really, predator home loans and coming good on $200K checks from people and asking for $600K here and there and whatever. So I feel like I can't do the quick math, but I feel like it's like 250 or 2.5 mil or something like that. It's got to be like kind of in that range as a total. You think it's worth it? I don't know.
I really don't know, because I feel like
I'm not in the oil business, so I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Like, I feel so underqualified for the question, but at the same time, I think that's part of what the movie's trying to do. Is that you give something like this where it's like, this is not about. It kind of is later, especially with Anna. Like, my favorite parts of the movie are anytime that Anna and Abel are clashing in any way.
100%.
Just amazing. Jessica Chastain is my favorite part of the film. She's amazing. But I think that you pick something like he's just trying to buy that place, and like that's so low stakes. It's not about like family blood feud or honor or like generations like The Godfather. It's not that big. It's not some coke empire where we're gonna shoot them up by the end. It's just that thing. And why the fixation? How does that start all of this? Like, we can't even figure out the math. It might just be movie math. Maybe it doesn't add up. Maybe it's like in script rewrites, they were like, they'll never notice.
Nobody will ever do the math on this one.
So, but I think that's the power of it is like pick something that would make the audience say, but just buy somewhere else. Like, I know it's right there, but is the closeness and the convenience really worth all this?
Mm-hmm. I think it kind of all ties back to a very particular line that Abel does say, and he very, very convincingly, very strongly tells his new salesman, and we'll mention this a little bit later, we are better. He's talking about his oil company. He has a very invested stake in this idea of what being a successful business owner is. And to him, he has to have this expansion. That's his out of all these, federal indictments that are coming, all of these charges that are coming down the road, all of this back history with Anna's father apparently being a pretty prominent gangster and being pretty prominently in that world. His drivers needing to start using violence and being armed. This is like I think how he justifies it to himself to say, okay, we can do everything else, but if as long as I get this property, my sins are washed. I'm a clean man because I paid for it cleanly. I initially was going to have a bank loan, and I was able to get a loan from other people. I'm a success because I expanded. My business is growing. All of these things. I think that's like how he tells it to himself. One more point before we get into true cinema here. You brought it up. Originally someone else supposed to be in the Oscar Isaac role. Javier Bardem, originally cast for this movie. Oscar Isaac replaces him about 6 months later. Better movie? Worse movie? How are we faring with Javier?
I don't know if worst movie is like how I want to say it, but it's not this movie. I don't think it can be simmering with Javier. Not that he can't be understated, but he's just such a menacing presence.
Yeah.
I think the only time I've ever seen him be somewhat normal, and even then it was still kind of toxic and weird, was like Vicky Cristina Barcelona. But like, you can't. This guy Javier would be terrifying. Like I don't think that he has trepidation the way that Oscar can play the anxieties and the smallness of a Belle in this world, the justifications that you're talking about, which you're spot on about, the slippery slope and the road to hell and all that. I think Javier, again, I want to be wrong because he's an amazing actor, but I just feel like he'd be like, yeah, arm them. That makes more sense.
100%. And like physicality wise, he's just too big of a guy. His presence is far too powerful to be in a role like this. I think of, you say menacing, I think of Skyfall. I think of like his villain, right? And that monologue, that rap monologue he delivers, like that would be so delicious to have in a movie like this, maybe to end on a monologue like that. But is that worth the risk of really overreaching on literally what our character is suffering from, which is the world crushing around him, right?
Exactly, because Abel's a character that wants to affect the world around him, like you said, in legitimate ways, ways that he believes to be legitimate and that he desperately clings to, and the world keeps affecting him. Every time that he thinks he sets the terms, he doesn't. And these clashes with the world, with the business, these interactions with like David Oyelowo's character, who's great. Like those interactions are all different if it's somebody that I believe would have the power in every scene.
That would be fun. I mean, like, let's do that. Let's get our miniseries to have Javier Bardem. We got to replace Jessica Chastain with somebody. We're doing a cast reboot. But that'd be kind of fun. That'd be totally different. But you know what? We're just making a new show at this point. We're not. Yeah. It's not attached to.
We are now in the rebooting business. Give us money.
Give us money. Let's make something. All right. Let's do our true cinema moments. We'll kind of walk through the movie here. I wanted to put the first one, the first garbage truck theft. We talked about the score setting the tone. This is the first thing we see. We're kind of really thrown into 1981, literally being a most violent year. Happens from the start, and honestly, on the rewatch, we know what's going down. First time I saw this, I was like, "What? We are really hitting the ground running. Like, what is going on around me?" I really appreciate this as the first scene, though.
Yeah, I think it's a really smart move, especially with the people crafting this film knowing that they're gonna go for that simmer. You have to hit us up top with something. It like rocks you like a jab and sort of throws you off your game immediately. And then as you start to settle in, I think you carry, at least I did, and maybe it's rewatches. Maybe that's the full context that's doing this. But I sort of carried the discomfort from this first scene into some of the quieter interactions. So I think it's well placed. Could you have started in like a, quiet sort of way and then like ramped up that first day? You could. But then we're ramping up and ramping back down for so long. Start here, start hot and end hot, if you're going to do something like this.
Totally. And in terms of like Abel's perspective and his point of view, this is exactly how Abel feels for the 2 hours that we're watching the movie. Mm-hmm. He feels like he's getting fucked at every twist and turn, and he can't do anything about it. And that's exactly how we feel as an audience member to kind of start this. The next one on the list is meeting with the police chief. We get more background, we get more information, widespread corruption in his industry. He's being looked into, and they're probably going to bring charges on him in the next couple of days. I like this scene in general. Like I said, like this movie's a solid 3.5 star movie. And so I'm trying to like, as we go through this, I'm trying to figure out like what could have changed, what would have made me say like, oh, we got like a pretty, like a 4-star heater on our hand, right? Mm-hmm. I think that relationship with the police, I like where it ends. I would have loved a lot more maybe like grimy sliminess throughout of Abel trying to like fend that off as we go. And instead we just get really blatant, like, we're going to bring charges to you. We raid your house. And at the end, I want some political power. You know what I mean? But I do like the scene.
Yeah, it's a good scene. It's well written. It's well acted. But I agree. I think if you're going to add punch, this is the area. So like you're saying, some sliminess or a lot more close calls, things that for both parties, and I think that's a way to, because Abel struggles with legitimacy. And so if you have legitimacy sort of breathing down his neck more the entire time, that's, you could do some angel devil stuff with this world that Anna comes from, and then with the actual law being more of a biting presence throughout. I agree. That's going in the reboot as well.
Love it. Yeah, put it in the reboot. Take our notes right here, our first draft. I love that you mentioned that, because to me, that's exactly why Anna's confession of skimming money from the company hits so damn well.
Yeah.
Is because it's illegitimate, and he has worked his whole life to be legitimate. And the person that he thought he could trust the most is just like everybody else. She's just trying to survive, and she changes because of the system. So maybe at the risk of losing a little bit of that impact in that scene, you can bring some of that to the rest of the movie. I think would be pretty interesting. I mentioned the training the new salespeople. He mentions that we are better. There's one other quote here. He says, "You will never do anything as hard as staring someone straight in the eye and telling the truth." Again, his reckoning with legitimacy. There's genuinely moments in the script where it's pretty impressive, where I'm like, wow, this is really getting the point across, and it feels really good. And I like this scene too, because it shows him strictly as a businessman. He's literally just trying to grow his business.
Yeah. I think that line is as close, I think, to like the line that you get. It's a great character defining moment. And I think that they do a really good job in general of endearing you to Abel. Every time I've watched it, he's somebody that you wish it wouldn't go this way, which is not usually what happens with gangster movies or with crime movies. Like, we mentioned Uncut Gems, like, he kind of deserves.
Hey man, justice for Howie. Justice for Howie. Come on.
Howie was going to win. That was his day. And he did.
Yeah. He did.
But yeah, I think that this is the kind of man that he is, and you do believe it. And that's the thing. You believe it throughout the interactions. And it makes you wonder, and ask an essential question, which is like, would it be different if the parties around him were different? But he's not, unfortunately, he's not in a position to change any of that, and he's not as much as he wants to, and he's not the greatest at adapting within his setting, and it's kind of chewing him up.
Of course, because he cannot take his eyes off of owning that piece of property when he can just drop it and just figure out how to be successful with what he does have, because he's being robbed blind left and right. I mean, he's losing hundreds of thousands of dollars all the time. And, Albert Brooks's character even tells him, like, this has to end. We have to put a stop to this because we're financially bleeding. Next scene on here is hitting the deer. Did you... I know we've rewatched it. Even on my second watch, I still got a jump scare, dude. It's just out of left field.
Yeah, I think by this point, I was sort of like, Oh yeah, it's the deer thing. But
Yeah.
first couple times, yeah, it's really effective. And
It's
again,
it lulls you to sleep, right?
Exactly. You pick a moment in a movie like this, and you're like, oh Jesus, like I didn't think this was that kind of movie, even though it said most violent year.
Mm-hmm. And this is really the turn for Anna as a character. We start to basically see that Abel is starting to become emasculated by his wife, and he just doesn't have what it takes sometimes to cross the finish line, to do the violence, to do the things that need to be done. She gets out, and he's like, I'm grabbing a tire iron. And, you know, if things go that way for him, that's a long and laborious, uncomfortable scene that we have to sit through. But Jessica Chastain, she just busts out that pistol and takes it to task and kills the deer. Jessica Chastain is already very beautiful, already very attractive. And when she's in charge of a gun, I'm not a gun guy, but I'm just saying it's pretty good, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's like just the ferocity, like you're saying, like if it had been him, like it would have been like, oh, this is sad. This is
what a sad man.
Scene. This is a sad scene. He's sad. I'm sad. The deer. It's all sad. But the way that she completely takes charge of the situation, of him, of the narrative, of life and death, you're just like, wow. Like she is. It's a great way to add a layer for later. You get an idea of what she's capable of and what she's. You know, it's a microcosm of her entire arc. Is like she is the killer, you know, to quote the great Logan Roy, Abel's not a killer.
Abel's not a killer. This is now the second episode in a row that we have reverted to Succession quotes, and I feel great about it.
It's a great thing to do. It's fantastic.
Not a killer. Oh gosh, I love that. Okay, next on the list, blow up about the gun. They get home. Abel freaks out, and basically Anna says, you need to protect us. You have to do this. And a big portion of this blow up is, you know, do you have a permit? Is this gun legal? Like, if they catch you, do you know what will happen to us?
Yeah.
And these very contradicting ideas. You said that your favorite parts of the movie are when we do have these kind of intimate contradictions. I heavily agree with you. This scene is really dynamite.
Too. Yeah. This is it. This is the first time I watched it. The back and forth, the dialogue, the way it's where it's blocked, the way that the anxiety builds, and you're with him, but you also can see, like emotionally, I think you want to be with him, but you can see that he's losing control of the scene, of the interaction, and of everything that it means. She's thinking big picture, and he's not, even though he thinks he is, and that's the thing about it. He thinks that everyone's by the book, even though the killing of the deer should be the symbolism that tells them we're not thinking by the book here.
Right.
And I think it's a really, really good build for the dynamics that sort of carry the themes.
If we're looking to plus the movie, I think this is something as well worth noting of this kind of Anna storyline. It does take place, but I think it is exceptionally intriguing when it does happen because they have such different viewpoints on things. I would have loved just more. I just wanted more of their interaction. We get a lot of Abel with Albert Brooks's character, with his salespeople, with Julian, his driver. Like, we get a lot of ancillary relationships, which are beneficial. But I think ultimately this relationship is the most fascinating in terms of what they both stand for. I did want to just point out the next scene, Jessica Chastain's line reading. This was very disrespectful, is iconic and incredible. After the cops raid her house during her daughter's birthday party, they hide all these boxes. She knows in that moment, she's kind of in charge. She knows the direction that they want to head. And again, like, I just want more of her character.
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, it is an iconic moment, and gosh, she just owns it so well. She has such a. She's so. I think it's because we know that she's a sweetheart of a human being.
Yeah.
But she could take it to that place, man. She something breaks inside of her when she goes for these roles. She's so good. Yeah. I think she got a Golden Globe nom. I gotta check.
I'd love to see that.
Somebody did. Chastain was nominated for Best Supporting Actress at the Critics' Choice and the Globes.
Wow.
Okay.
I love that. I respect that. That's incredible. It's probably for that line reading, honestly, because
for that one,
it's
yeah,
really good.
It also
for that
had
one.
it won Best Film, Best Actor, and Supporting Actress at the National Board of Review Awards. That's something.
Okay, well, that's something. I mean, I've never heard of the National Board of Reviews, but that's cool.
Well, they've just unsubscribed, Ethan.
No, we've lost a listener. Damn it.
The whole National Board.
Okay, I've heard of you. I promise. I respect the opinion. Just a few more here. The double assault. Julian gets robbed. The salesman gets kidnapped. We're really starting to see that it is a most violent year in this situation. And then we get what's really the energetic peak of the movie is Abel chasing the truck, chasing the driver. And even in that moment, he's got the fucking driver locked in. Nobody's around him. He's in the middle of nowhere. He wants to know who he drives for. He's got a gun to his head. Can't pull the trigger. Won't do it. Oh. It doesn't have what it takes to be cutthroat in business, in being a gangster, and whatever it may be, right?
And it's like you, again, it puts you in that checkmate where you find yourself being like, well, just shoot him. But then at the same time, you're like, is that the stance that I'm supposed to have? Am I supposed? I mean, obviously, we're litigating movie stances, here. But like the morality and you wanting your character to get what he wants, knowing that he wants legitimacy, makes that a struggle. But at the same time, you already chased him down.
You went to all that effort.
You went to all that effort, and so you've already. This is not fit into your plan of I did it clean. That's over. Yeah. That's been over. Yeah,
as soon as he decided to pursue that truck, I think that's a real shift for him that he doesn't accept, obviously, and he tries to like recant on that and go back and say that maybe he didn't act that way. The skimming money confession, I mentioned this. I love this scene. I think Oscar Isaac takes it to that kind of extra level as Abel in this, and comes down on Anna and basically tells her like why would you do this to me? This will ruin me. It does come with a very quick resolution kind of the next morning, which I don't know if I'm necessarily a fan of. I would have liked to see this drawn out quite a bit, but I love that she thinks she's doing the best thing. And because her father was a gangster, she knows you can't play by the rules. You have to do things dirty, and she does.
Yeah, she's cut from a different cloth, and I think that the more that they do in this film to enhance that aspect of her character and to illustrate that this is essential for her, like this is built in, that there are people that have it and there are people that don't, and I think that making his spouse somebody that is sort of inherently corrupt or grew up in a corrupt environment, where she has inherited these lessons and this mentality, it alienates him even more. Because like you said earlier, this is the person you're supposed to trust, the mother of your children, your spouse, your person you're with all the time, and I think that's a really smart move. Is I think in a lot of different stories it would have been a partner or a mentor or somebody else, and the wife is often like the victim or is off to the side or doesn't know anything sometimes, and or is just treated like a princess, rich mob wife, and she walks away. But for her to be like, no, you live with the representation of what you honestly probably should be to do what you're doing, it's an indictment of his existence.
It does raise an interesting question for me. How did they meet? What is their backstory? Because they do come from two very different backgrounds. If Abel's such a straight shooter, why did he think that there was a long-term upside to, in getting in good relations with the kind of a gangster family? Was that his play? I don't know.
Yeah, it almost makes me wonder if, and I would have to revisit it again. I don't know if there's any throwaway lines or anything about the father, but like, was Abel like early on like a driver for her dad or something like that didn't know? Or there's lots of things that I could see being interesting. Like maybe her dad was like an early investor or something. Yeah, okay. Things like that. I think it probably started in a way where maybe Abel and his infinite idealism and his like, I can fix it. Like maybe he started with her, like I can fix her. And maybe he thought like she'd go legit if
She never was.
And she never was. She you don't have it, Abel. That's the thing. You're not him.
You're not him. There we go. So in our 8-part series, we'll dedicate one episode to a little prequel, a little dive into their relationship, right? So that episode 5, maybe. I don't know, maybe a little earlier.
You're exactly what I was thinking. I was like, we do the blow up, we do the fight about this giving the money, and then we flashback.
Yeah, and then we figure out how we got there.
Yep. Whatever actress, we give her bangs because that just says young.
100%. Yeah. Add the bangs, you drop off 20 years. Last true cinema moment here I have, very end scene. Julian just blows his brains out. He just calls it. And this is the culmination. And it works really well for me. I think it's effective of everything Abel has been fighting against. Julian's storyline, I think, is a little laborious in terms of like how much time we spend with him.
I think it's like a bit undercooked. Like I think he needs something to get me as a personality trait or something.
Yes, I totally agree. But then we get to this point and the stress and everything has gotten to him. He kills himself on the spot, shoots himself. And what is Abel's first move? He goes to his oil tanker that has a bullet hole that is draining oil, and he stuffs it, and he just tells Anna to call the cops. And I think it's beautiful, and I think it's poignant, and it really works for me, and I think it's a great scene.
Yeah, I think it really works. I'm looking at it here, just sort of in the summary and everything, and just like the way that it immediately just becomes a small detail in what you assume is going to be a larger picture. Like, and he pleads too, to take care of his family and everything, which is such an innocent, like, human concern. But at that point, Abel is like he's saving oil over blood. Yep. Like that symbolism is so powerful. You're pleading with him to take care of your family before you shoot yourself, and then he's just like, nope, I'm gonna handle this. Like, I think at that point Abel dies, which is the interesting thing. Like, he doesn't like, it's not trial by fire and he's destroyed and reborn as like some monster. It just kind of happens so subtly, and it's more like Abel gives up with the way that he acts in that scene. And I think that, you think about these screenplays. I think it was Jordan Peele that said, after Us, like, you think about what is the world like 15 minutes after the movie ends. And it's like 15 minutes after this movie ends, it's like, I feel like Abel just becomes like a husk of a man, and that like this operation gets run by Anna and more increasingly so. And this was the moment where I think he could have, I don't know what he could have done at this point, but yeah, he has a series of just like, it's not like he's a passive protagonist, but he kind of is. Like, he makes choices, but he's sort of just like the world beats him down type protagonist. And this is the end point. Yeah,
I totally agree. I'm very curious, like, what would happen the next day. Like, how does this reflect? And he does have a conversation with the police chief of that political power kind of play, and I think that would be a really fun thing to explore. We just don't get there. We don't get the opportunity to do it, and like the buildup is fun, but I think we end at a really interesting place where we could explore so much more and could have much more impactful stuff from Abel, from Anna, and really start to see a better power dynamic. I love Albert Brooks in this movie. I think he's great, kind of as like the right-hand man. And then, all of the underlying details I do think work pretty well. Again, like you mentioned, there's some underbaked things. I like the score. I think there's a lot of like pros and cons.
And I love the cinematography too. Bradford Young. People listening, he did Arrival. He did Solo: A Star Wars Story. He did Selma. I love the colors here and some of the shots. And when you get the suicide at the end, it's such a horrific moment. But the costuming and the way that it's shot and everything, and like the blood splatter and like just like all of that, it just works so well. It looks so, by the end, very sickly.
Yeah. You mentioned the colors. We get this really, nice grimy yellow sheen kind of over everything, it seems, to make that 80s New York hard industrial kind of feel.
Yeah.
I did notice as well, there's a lot of blue in this movie. Oscar Isaac wears a lot of blue as a belle. Anna wears a lot of blue pants most of the time. Their door to their house is very, very bright blue. I didn't do any further research into that. I don't know if blue is like a mafia thing or what, but I like the colors, and I think it looked really good as a whole. You're going with the blow up over the gun. Is that going to be your true cinema moment?
Yeah, I'm going to pick the gun. The gun argument, I think, that's the clip that at the Golden Globes that year when she was nominated. I hope they played that.
We'll have to do some research. We got to hit the archives.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going with the skimming the money confession. That's going to be my true cinema moment. Oddly enough, another intimate conversation between Abel and Anna. And I think that's where this movie really, really does shine. I like that. I like that conversation. And I do think it's one of the best parts of the movie, if not the best. Okay, we're going to do our A1X. I know last time we did this movie, I think we also did Oscar Isaac and Jessica Chastain. We're going to do them again since it's been a year. Our thoughts and ideas might have changed. We might have grown attached to other projects. And then we'll do Alex Ebert for the score as well, for what K-Fids wanted to do. So I've got Jessica Chastain here. First on the list, I didn't put it on the notes, but I do just want to say it is up for contention if you want to pick it. The red carpet compatibility and chemistry that Jessica Chastain and Oscar Isaac have, I think is worth noting and exceptionally incredible thing. So if you want to pick that, go ahead. The Tree of Life, The Help, Texas Killing Fields, The Color of Time, Zero Dark 30, Mama, Miss Julie, Interstellar, A Most Violent Year, The Martian, Crimson Peak, Miss Sloan, Molly's Game, X-Men Dark Phoenix, It Chapter 2, Ava, Scenes from a Marriage, The Eyes of Tammy Faye, for what she did win a leading actress Oscar, Armageddon Time, The Good Nurse, and George and Tammy. What's going to be your A1 act, Alden?
You put the images of them on the red carpet in my mind.
I know.
Just all the credit in the world to their spouses and just everything. Because my God, and like they're just unreal. Dynamite. They're dynamite in this. They're dynamite in Scenes from a Marriage, which will break your heart.
I haven't seen it yet for that reason. I don't know if I'm emotionally ready.
I honestly don't think married people should watch it.
I'm out. Okay, I'm done.
It's just, especially not together. Like you're like, oh, like yeah, there's some humor, there's some love, and there's some sex, but like at the same time, it's my God, it's brutal. Wow, what a filmography. It's so many varied performances too. Like she's the best part of things that aren't even that great.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go with Interstellar. I've been in an Interstellar mood. I think that she is just like the beating heart of that movie. I think that everybody remembers McConaughey crying, but they don't forget the other side of that scene, which is her and sort of like the hope that she has. It's such a unique meeting of heartbreak and hope in that performance.
Yeah, Ben is not going to be happy that you said that. I'm just going to tell you, Alden, right now. He's not an Interstellar guy.
No.
He won't be a fan of that.
I'm not going on the cruise.
We'll see. This episode might never get released. Who knows? I think you're right that she really is the best part of a lot of things. I can't believe she was in X-Men Dark Phoenix. I saw that movie so long ago, and I don't remember that. And I
love that both of these two are in inferior
X-Men films,
bad X movies from the later Fox era.
Tough beat. I am gonna go with Zero Dark 30. I'm kind of in a mood for like really harsh, kind of in your face movies like that. Shout out Catherine Bigelow for like making that movie. It is intense, and without Chastain, I don't think you get the same end product. She is absolutely incredible in that movie. And, again, in a position of power, a position of dominance, she's controlling what's going on in that film. Next up is Oscar Isaac. We've got Body of Lies, Robin Hood, Sucker Punch, Drive, 10 Years, Won't Back Down, Inside Llewyn Davis, A Most Violent Year, Ex Machina, which, by the way, like back to back, that's pretty good in terms of like A24 Oscar Isaac showing up in good things. Mojave, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, X-Men Apocalypse, Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, Annihilation, Life Itself, Triple Frontier, Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, The Card Counter, Dune, Scenes from a Marriage, and Moon Knight. I know for sure Moon Knight was not out when we talked about Oscar Isaac last time.
Yes.
What are you feeling?
I wish I knew what I chose last time. That's the thing.
Me too. I didn't go back and look.
Yeah, pretty sure Interstellar was not my choice for her. Pretty sure. So I feel safe about that. On this one, I'm me. Like, people watching this video, I've got an Attack of the Clones hat on. It would be so easy for me to jump in and pick any of the sequel trilogy, particularly Last Jedi. But for the sake of not being painfully on brand,
sure.
I will pick Moon Knight. I will. I think that his performance in Moon Knight is so unbelievably good.
Yeah.
That I love that it was a series. It needed that time. But I feel like when people are like, oh, the future of the MCU, there's no Downey or whatever to anchor it. I'm like, I'm not saying that character is somebody that could anchor a franchise, because he's sort of inaccessible by design. He is an erratic presence with many personalities, and there's magic and all this stuff. But Oscar makes all those choices with so much humanity in that show, and things that easily could have gotten out of hand, like a fake British accent, which sounds fake because it is. Mm-hmm. Like that's like the trailers for that came out, and everyone's like, "What's he doing?" And people that read comics were like, "Well, hold on, that's the
how
point."
It is.
Yeah, like that it is a fake accent. He's doing a bad one because Steven's not real. Like, for him to balance all of that, and have a third one at the end there with Jake, like, he's just such a dynamic guy. Really, really elevated everything.
I agree with you. I would have chosen Moon Knight as well. For the sake of conversation, I'll choose something else. I think he's sublime in Moon Knight, and although I wanted something a little bit different out of that series in particular, I do think his swaps between his personalities are by far and away the most intriguing part of that show and the most well done. Mm-hmm. I will go with Ex Machina, actually, which is probably what I chose last time. I almost chose Drive, but I was going to choose it for Ryan Gosling, which is not the game here. So I'm going to go with Ex Machina because he is so weird in that movie. Like, he goes, he has an all-night bender, and then he's up at fucking 6 a.m. working out all of his toxins. And it's like, you're up to some weird shit, dude. Like, you're just a weird guy. So, and I like his look in that movie a lot. I love, like, the clean, bald head with the glasses. I think he looks really good. So, yeah, we'll go with Ex Machina.
And you know what? His house in that movie? In the last
Succession,
episode
baby.
of Succession.
Let's go!
We're back.
We're back. The moment that Roman and Kendall walked in that house, I was like, I have been in this home before. I know where we are. And they're peering across the way, and they're
so
like,
good.
Is that you? Yeah, I'm the good looking one. So good.
Perfect.
It all comes back to Succession, honestly. I don't know. We got to have a Succession spinoff pod. Okay, third A1 act. Alex Ebert did the score. Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. We've got Ema Robot, A Most Violent Year. All Is Lost, which is another collab he did with Chandor. I'm Dying Up Here, The Truth Has Changed, and The Quiet Epidemic. Honestly, I'm not a big fan of Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. I don't really seek them out and listen to them. I've never listened to Ema Robot, and so I'm going with The Most Violent Year. I think the score is really, really, really good.
Yeah, I will choose, and I agree with you. I will choose, again, because of familiarity's sake. I've missed some of these, but I have watched the first couple episodes of I'm Dying Up Here because I have heard from people, despite it getting canceled, from people in the stand-up comedy world, that it is one of the greatest depictions of that world. And I will choose that. I have to go back and watch it, and I'll have to check out some more music stuff, because again, what the takeaway here for me with him is just a really thoughtful composer where, because for them it's like they're presented with these films, and if there's not that big beat to latch on to, then what do you do? And I think that he really, really thought about how to play with the fact that it's a slow burn.
And I think too that one of the most compelling arguments for a good score is, especially in this type of genre, is something that you might not necessarily think about. And that means that it did its job. It's subtle, it's tone setting, it's direction driving, and this score has all of that. Okay, that brings us to our A24 ranking. This is your first time doing this type of ranking. Welcome to the new system. We've got A through F. You can add a plus, you can add a minus. You can do whatever you want. What ranking, what grade are you going to go with for A Most Violent Year?
I will go with a nice solid like B24 that's like not low enough to be minus, but is right there. So like an 84%.
I love it.
When you're because I think it's like what, like when you get to the threes when they add a minus.
Yep.
So it's like right there, like the most specific B that I can deliver. Yeah, exactly. Down to everything. I'm punching it into my
I'll put that on the notes for the future. That way when you come back in another year, we know it was an 84 and not like an 84.5.
Exactly. 100%. That half is everything. That half is because we didn't get just a little bit more Anna in the movie.
100% agree. And like, I hate to say it, but you know, even in this genre, I think it could be beneficial, if not for the gratitude of movie making in general. When you have two exceptionally beautiful people on screen, we should probably do a little something with that. And I think that would have been an interesting dynamic to explore. Again, if we got 8 hours with their relationship, maybe we see some of that play out, some of their intimacy, and how they might derive from that or push one another away or close or whatever it might be. That could have added the 0.5%. I think I was actually going to go with a B24 as well. I upgraded Beau is Afraid last week on the pod. I originally gave it a C24. I upgraded it to a B. I'm actually going to give this a B-24. So I like it. I do think it's underrated. I do think it's a movie that is worth recommendation of like, hey, I'm looking for a little bit of a thriller, a little bit of a New York crime thing. Like, what's a good thing we got going on that's not Goodfellas, that's not, right, at the heart of this genre, that's not The Irishman and 4 hours long. I think this really fits a lot of boxes. But again, it is a slow burn. If that works for you, like for us, then it works very well. If not, I could see how this might be a drag. It might be a slog. It might be something you're not entirely invested in. But in terms of like the A24 catalog, I do wish more people watched it. And I think B- is pretty accurate. Do you have any closing thoughts on A Most Violent Year, on making miniseries, writing scripts, anything crazy?
Yeah, my closing thought is that I've been trying to think of who would be Anna in the
idea. Yeah.
And I can't think of anybody. Like, it's not that it's impossible, but she's just so good. Jessica Chastain is one of the best to ever do it. She's one of the best of her generation, surely. And I love and adore her. That's my main takeaway here, is that if you haven't watched this and you're listening to this, we've spoiled a ton of it. But if you're still so inclined, go check it out for two great performances. And if A24 ever starts to do maybe it's like some genre box sets, like do a crime one or do like A24 like the early years or something, and like do like 8 to 10 movies, throw this in there, get some shine on it. Like, that's
a great idea. We gotta you gotta trademark this stuff, Alden. We can't be giving it away for free.
I know.
We gotta be careful. That's a great idea. I love that. Yeah, I think you're totally right. Two excellent performances, a really interesting film. More praise for Jessica Chastain, and quite honestly, I want to see Oscar Isaac do more genre stuff like this. I think he's really good in this movie, and I think he embodies the character quite well. So yeah, check out this movie. It's definitely worth checking out if you are trying to look for something that's a little different in the A24 catalog, or if you're new to A24 and you're only used to the Everything Everywhere All at Once's or the Uncut Gems, this is something of a totally different speed and a totally different lifetime, quite honestly, when it comes to A24. So it's worth checking out. Next week on the pod, Ben is going to be back. We're going to have another guest. This time, it is a new guest. We are covering the movie Close that was nominated for Best International Feature Film at the 2022 Oscars. This was Clayton Davis's favorite movie of 2022. Good friend of the pod, senior awards editor over at Variety. So that's going to be a really good episode. You don't want to miss it. So stay tuned. Alden, thanks so much for coming on the pod, man.
Yeah,
it was
man,
a blast.
Thanks for having me.
So glad that you could come back. If people want to find more of you, where can they do that at?
Well, you can find me back here next year talking about a most violent year.
Book it in your calendars.
We're going to have a spinoff called The Most Violent Years, where it's just this movie every year until we're elderly. Yeah, you can find me at that Alden Diaz, THATALDENDIAZ, and then on my Star Wars podcast, Octa Radio, as well as over on Casually Talk with Ken Knapsack, covering House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones, Rings of Power, all the fantasy shows. Writing for StarTrek.com here and there, a couple other things, but yeah, I'll let you know on Twitter if it still exists.
Awesome. Yeah, if it's still around by the time this pod comes out. Highly recommend following Alden. A great follow on Twitter. Honestly, Alden, you help me stay grounded in my overly emotional film Twitter takes that people just rile me up about. So I appreciate that. Thanks for,
I try. I don't know how I'm grounding, but I appreciate that.
Well, you are. It's the magic of Alden. Yes, thanks so much for coming on the pod. What are your thoughts of a most violent year? Let us know on Twitter or Instagram. We are at 24 minutes of A24. Been tweeting out some good stuff recently. Some great screen grabs from our podcast of Ben saying he didn't like Beau's Afraid and me just like freaking out and absolutely losing it. Fun stuff. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube where you can actually watch us. You can see us have this conversation in real life, and generally can tune into Ben's really good shirts. He always picks a good shirt. So yeah, tune in for that. Go subscribe. Don't miss the pod. And yeah, come back next week as we cover Close. I'm Ethan Simi. Spring break forever, bitches.